Hi, I'm Mike Warner, this year's president of the Greater Medina Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. I would like to welcome you to the 2018 Candidates Forum in partnership with Medina TV. All candidates in contested races were invited to be interviewed. I'm pleased to be joined by Jared Fry of Medina TV for the interviews. We hope you find these interviews informative and helpful as you cast your vote. We would like to welcome Susan Palmer, candidate for the Congress of the 16th District, to the Greater Medina Chamber and Medina TV's Candidates Forum. Let's begin by having you tell us about yourself.
Well, thank you first off for the invitation so much. For me, your congressional candidate should be closest to home. It should be one of your neighbors, your business leaders, your community leaders that best represents you. So it should be a reflection of our neighborhoods and our communities within the 16th Congressional District. I've lived and worked here for 20 years. I've run a business here, raised my family here, and I am very much a reflection of our community.
Very good. I'd like to tell us a little bit more about yourself, expand on
Sure.
what your business expertise is, what your background is.
So I've spent 30 years in healthcare. I started out putting in pacemakers and defibrillators back in the beginning of all that, and then I came out teaching physicians how to use the equipment, and then research and development, and moved more onto the industry side. I also owned and operated my own medical consulting firm for about 7 years, helping bring in products from outside the United States in, or specifically for a Canadian firm, bringing in their products into the United States. So, like I said, I've run a business. I've been in healthcare for 30 years, and it's such a complex issue. To be able to hit the ground running on the Medicare, Medicaid, and the challenges we have in our healthcare system in the United States is very important, not only to me, my district, and my state.
Now, you did a good job of mentioning your background there, but what are kind of skill sets or expertise that you feel will help you with this position?
Well, you know, one of the best skill sets I have is I kind of like the high-tension jobs I always have. I've always been the person they throw in the fire when something blows up, send Susan, and that's a good skill set to have. I think, you know, understanding the healthcare environment in which we live and being able to collaboratively work across a broad range of people and interests. And in the United States, it's a lot of interests. You know, it's industry, it's hospital, it's patients, it's patient advocates, it's senior citizens. It's a wide variety, and to meet all those needs, you really need somebody who's used to working in that type of environment with all those different interests, and that's what I've done for 30 years.
Okay, great. Now, one of the things, as you see polls out today, a lot of people are saying that the governmental system tends to be broken or isn't quite, you know, working on all cylinders. Do you feel that is the same way, or do you see that there are fixes that maybe need to be made?
If we're talking about general government, I think the biggest complaint you hear from people is a lack of transparency, a lack of responsibility and responsiveness to voters. I mean, how often have you seen these virtual town halls? You can't even be bothered to stand in front of your voters and talk to them about their wants, needs, and concerns. And that is not acceptable. It's not acceptable as a voter. It's not acceptable as an elected official. You pay my salary. Isn't that the general idea? Should I not answer to you? I think I should answer to you. You know, whether it's debates in a primary or a general election, my voters have a right to kick my tires, see what I know, see what I don't know. And that's the whole idea of the transparency. And between the gerrymandering that we've now resolved in the state and will be fully resolved in 22, that is an expansion of voters saying that's enough of this. We've had enough of not representing our wants and needs and just being more about maintaining power or, you know, taking care of your donors. It's an unfortunate situation.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, you're kind of expressing some natural leadership abilities here. You've answered some of these questions. How do you feel your leadership abilities differ from that of your opponent?
You know, I think it makes a huge difference to actually be from the community. The idea that out of 735,000 of us, the Republican Party couldn't find someone from Ohio to represent us who was living here at the time, I find startling. I find insulting as a voter. We have lots of good leaders here in Ohio, people that were in the district. I mean, Republican, Democrat on both sides. There's no reason why they couldn't pick someone more local to represent us who already knows it. It's very hard to come into a community. If I moved to San Francisco, I wouldn't know anything about San Francisco in a year, let alone to judge those issues and problems and solutions. So I think that's inherently important to be from this area. Yeah.
Very good. You mentioned issues from this area. One of the things that a lot of businesses struggle with is workforce. What do you think you can do to help businesses with the workforce or lack of workforce in the area.
And Medina County has one of the lowest unemployment rates in the state. We are still above the national average by almost a percentage, but as the state, but Medina's like at 4.2. Certainly for workforce development, there's a lot of people talking about workforce development, but it actually requires an investment. It actually requires money. We've had a fair amount of gutting in secondary education at a state level, both at a college level and trade school level. We simply don't invest in the money in those areas. That's a state issue, but certainly the federal government could offer a match grant, get back to some of the funding the state used to do for secondary education to try and move people up the ladder. I mean, I grew up in Youngstown, definitely climbed that ladder, started out with a technical degree first before I finished my bachelor's in business, and I climbed that ladder, and that availability that I had is not there anymore. The state or federal government doesn't support that kind of future advancement we need for our workforce today.
Very good. In other areas of priorities, that the examples you may be able to give that the government may be able to help businesses and do other things in areas to help grow.
Sure. My husband's a serious small business owner and a registered Republican. This was his first Democratic primary in his life. And what I find most, that I hear back from most of the businesses in my community is the constantly changing ground underneath them. With the unsettled business environment, with the tariffs and the trade wars, it's very difficult to maintain your supply chain and your exports and your imports of your manufacturing. You have no idea what's going to happen, and it's making it difficult for them to set pricing. Complaints from customers on both sides, whether domestic or international customers, they're constantly complaining, and it makes it very hard to set up a 5-year plan and figure out what you're going to do. And again, with the workforce issue, how do you know what kind of workforce you're going to need when you don't know how all these things are to be affecting your business model? It makes it downright impossible to figure out where we're going and what we're doing, and that affects the entire economy. Both the employers and the employees. It's too disruptive. Right. It's making it so chaotic. It's very difficult to get things done from a business perspective in our country right now.
Now you've done a good job. You've touched on the healthcare, education, and workforce. But what are some of the issues those are some of the issues. What are some other issues or things that you would like to take on in office that you feel you'll face when elected?
Well, the number one and number two issue for both the state and our district was healthcare, which you've already discussed, and immigration is discussion number two. And I'm a little more conservative on immigration issues. I think the biggest problem is people are trying to get high-paying jobs. That's why they come, right? So about half of our people that come in illegally come in flying. So a wall doesn't hit those people coming in that way. And once you get past a physical barrier, you only get past it once and the problem still exists. So where we need to create a solution is at the employer level. They need to be able to have some kind of secured Social Security number that they can just run a card and see if you are here and you're legal to be here. You can't just dump it on businesses and say, you prove how you're a U.S. citizen or how you're here legally. You have to put that in place, and that is our main problem. If they can't get work, they will not come. They will not overstay student visas. That is the barrier we need to bridge right there. We need to attack it from the business perspective while still making it easy on businesses to function. And then we can get the guest worker programs going again and the HB1. I mean, we're so low in unemployment, we're starting to dampen our economy by not allowing immigration, legal immigration, to come in and out of this country.
Now, another big issue is the opiate crisis. How do you feel Congress can assist or help with that?
Unfortunately, both state and federal have done a terrible job at it. Ohio's done nothing money-wise. They've put almost nothing behind it. The Medicaid expansion was instrumental for the opioid addiction here in Ohio. About 70% of our opioid addiction treatment in Ohio was funded through the expansion, either plain Medicaid or the Medicaid expansion. So that part's been instrumental for treatment. But we've done very little on a state and federal level to address Narcan's shortages. I grew up in Youngstown, and you've got cities like East Palestine and East Liverpool that are choosing between Narcan and overtime police pay. I mean, that's an insane place to put EMS, that they're choosing that way, and it makes it incredibly difficult. States like West Virginia have led in this. They supply Narcan, the state pays for it. So they supply Narcan to schools, churches, nurseries. It's everywhere. There's nowhere you can go, and they've dropped their death rate dramatically in West Virginia. They've gone from first to third, and unfortunately now we are first. And at a federal level, we've done, again, almost nothing. The level he made it as a national emergency didn't tie any dollars to it. So as long as there's not dollars tied to it, it's not going to make much of a difference. And then also, the DEA had brought charges against one of the pharmaceutical distributors that had dumped so much drugs into the West Virginia area, and they took away the criminal charges. That's the first thing the Justice Department did, and turned it to a civil infraction, which is unfortunate because they really had the evidence on them to prosecute them. If you did it once, one prosecution would fix that problem right there.
Now, I've always wondered, and I'll throw this question out to you, is how do you make that balance between your constituents, your local constituents, and then the needs of the state as a whole?
Well, you know, my job as a congresswoman is to represent the district, not the state. It isn't. I mean, my job is to represent this district's wants and needs primary, not the parties, not the states. And I absolutely take that seriously, because when you pick someone from here that's a reflection of here, then I do reflect your wants and needs. And that is paramount to me, to be able to answer to my voters in those town halls that I'm meeting those wants and needs. Certainly, you should work with your state, all your state representatives, for like Lake Erie, the things that concern us all. And the opioid addiction is a good example of a statewide, actually something that has been poorly addressed here, very much so.
Very good. In closing, what else would you like the voters to know as they come to vote this year?
Well, I'm happy that I grew up in Youngstown. It prepared me for the political world in which I'm in. Thick skin, tough as nails, bare knuckles all the way, and I don't have any problem with any of that. It is very important that we choose someone that represents our community, that is from here, that represents the bedroom communities that most of us live in. You know, I live in Westlake, you guys live in Medina, but it is very reflective of that moderate stance all the way down the line. We have so much far left, far right, you know, anti-immigrant, and we're all immigrants. I mean, it is becoming very un-American right now on both sides of the fence, where we're getting just so extreme, and it's not a reflection of who we are as a community. And I think that moderation, that natural Youngstown get-it-done mentality has served me very well in this position.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, and best of luck this November.
Appreciate it. Thank you.